Alright, well, praise the Lord who provided this common carp in answer to prayer. I was praying for a carp so I could make a fish cleaning video on how to fillet a common carp. And one thing that I like to keep in mind when I catch fish that might not be the most desirable species for eating is that in the Bible, Paul says that godliness with contentment is great gain. You know, we came into the world with nothing and we'll go out of the world with nothing. And so that if we have food and clothing, we want to learn to be content with that. Alright, so the common carp is actually a very popular food fish in Central Europe. And they have so many of them in Central Europe, and they're so popular that the carp is actually the third most commonly produced fish in aquaculture around the world. They have so many of them, and it's popular in, say, the Czech Republic for Christmas Eve or Christmas meals, that there was a scientific study on carp, because in the markets in the Czech Republic, they actually have these circular tanks with so many carp in them. The scientists went around and they took pictures of all the carp in the tanks, and most of the carp were faced in the northerly direction. And since there was no other way for the carp to know which direction was north, the scientists concluded that the carp can actually sense the Earth's magnetic field, and we're wanting to align in the northerly direction because of the Earth's magnetic field. Now, isn't that wonderful and awesome?
Come alive, wake up, sleeper, he is risen, we are risen with him.
So let's demonstrate how to fillet the common carp. Let me also mention that in all American waters, the common carp is an invasive species. So one of my motivations for keeping the carp isn't because it's my family's favorite food to eat. We, like most Americans, we prefer a more mild flavored fish than the carp, which tends to be a little more strongly flavored. So we use it in dishes like fish tacos or fish po' boys. And in the fish po' boys we're planning to have with this guy, the plan is to load it up with some horseradish sauce and some spicy brown mustard and some pickled peppers to compensate for the strongly flavored flesh of the carp. But in America, it's an invasive species, so that's why I like to keep carp in America, because you know, these things in most American waters, they represent dead-end biomass. In other words, they're eating the same food sources that your favorite species are probably eating. You know, they eat crawfish and worms. We caught this one on a little lure imitating a fish, and it's common in some reservoirs. Once carp get to be above 4 or 5 pounds, they get out in the middle, and they're piscivores. They're fish eaters, they're bait eaters, just like bass and striped bass and flathead catfish. So once the carp become bigger than about 5 pounds, there's not a whole lot else in the reservoir to prey upon them or to eat upon them, to eat them. So they become dead-end biomass if they're not removed by the anglers who can take them home. And you know, I mean, you could just throw it in your garden if you want, or you could fillet it and eat it like we're going to demonstrate here. Alright, so my preferred tools for filleting the carp is I use a buck 6-inch special 119 knife, because the scales are kind of tough. So just to get the first fillet, separating the fillet from the backbone and cutting through those scales, that's why I like the bigger stout knife. And then to separate the fillet from the skin and scales, this is just a 7-inch Dexter Russell fillet knife. So, and I sharpened the knife before I started with the knife sharpener here, because it always makes things easier. So what you want to do is, I don't try and cut through the ribs on these guys, because the ribs on a fish this size are kind of thick. My first cut, I remove a few scales, and then I'm just kind of going down, and I'm staying outside the ribs, and I'm trying to separate the fillet from the rib cage, just staying well outside of it, because it's hard to cut through those thick bones. Alright, so I'm going to come down to the backbone here. Now I'm going to work the fillet knife along the backbone and cut through the scales and just separate the fillet from the backbone. And this method is on the quick side, so it doesn't take you all afternoon filleting however many carp you might happen to catch. But you know, there's a little meat that gets sacrificed in the interest of filleting it a little faster. Alright, so it's the red coloration of the meat that tends to also, most Americans don't find that to be their favorite. So the second slice with the Dexter Russell fillet knife just removes the fillet from the skin and scales. And there you go, a nice carp fillet. Alright, then it's just repeating the process on the other side. So the first cut, you just scrape a few scales out of the way so you can get your knife down in there and do the work. And the first cut, you're kind of separating, making the cut, separating the fillet that you're going to keep from the rib cage. So you're kind of going down toward the backbone, but also a little angled like this to try and make a better cut. Alright, the second cut is along the backbone, separating the fillet from the backbone. And I just need to do a little fine cut in there to more fully separate it. Alright, so now we have the fillet separated from the backbone. Flip it around and over. And now back to the Dexter Russell fillet knife. Separate the fillet from the skin and scales. Alright, so that's the second cut. So we have a second nice big carp fillet because the Lord provided a nice big common carp. Thank you, Jesus.
In your name